Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's How I Would Write Lost, Part 2. So in this video I will cover Season 2 of Lost, how I would write it. Now this video is a continuation of my How I Would Write Lost, where I did Part 1 where I covered Season 1. And now I'm going to cover Season 2. These are not standalone videos. This is a continuous series as I continue off of all the differences and all the stuff that I did in Part 1. So if you haven't seen Part 1, you should go watch that first before watching this video. Otherwise, you will be lost. Anyway, so as I said in Part 1, this video series is my version of how I think Lost should have went, or how it would go for a reboot. It's not to criticize the producers or showrunners or writers for what they did, because I know a lot of issues had to do with the format, the time period that Lost came out, and a lot of studio interference and all this outside influence, blah blah blah. But I think there were ways that if it was done in a more modern era, as like for a reboot, for example, where TV is a bit different and they had a more controlled environment and were able to plot things out a bit better, that it could have been a bit better and more succinct. So this is my version of what I could do. So in Season 2, is similar to Season 1, where the main difference that I'm making is I'm condensing the seasons, because as I said at the start, I'm keeping 6 seasons, but all 6 seasons will have exactly 13 episodes. So that means for the later seasons it won't affect them that much, because there was around that many episodes anyway. But for the earlier seasons, for the first 3, it's really cutting the episodes in half, so it's really condensing it. And this, I think, will really greatly improve the show, because it cuts out a lot of the fat. A lot of the issues people had with the first 3 seasons in particular was they got a bit tired of the show. They felt like it was going nowhere because it was meandering, there was too much filler, it was taking too long to get to the point or to get anywhere successful. So by cutting the episodes in half for each season, you make it a lot more, I think, enjoyable, and people are able to enjoy it and get through it quickly. Now it's a task for me, though, to try to make it all succinct and still hit all the beats I want to hit. And of course, I'm setting up the story to change drastically towards the end of the series, because I didn't like the ending of the series, so I'm also making my personal differences. So this is just my, fantasy, my personal opinion, my fan fiction, if you will, of how I would write Lost if it was ever rebooted. Anyway, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Now first, let me get into the character list for Season 2, because as I talked about in my Season 1 video, I'm having more supporting characters than we were before. And for Season 2, I actually won't mention them much during the bulk of the story, but you can just imagine that they're still there in the background. They pop up from time to time and say hello, but they don't really have any story influence because they're just supporting characters. But first, let me talk about the main cast of characters, which is pretty much the same as it was in Season 1. You got Jack, you got Kate, you got Sawyer, you got Locke, you got Sayid, you got Sun, you got Jen, you got Michael, Hurley, Charlie, Claire, and also the introduction of Ana Lucia and Mr. Echo. And the only character who's missing from this list is Walt, because Boone wasn't the main character in my version. So anyway, those are your main characters. So then we get into my supporting characters, which is a really different than it was before. We got Libby, Shannon, Rose, Bernard, Neil, aka Frogurt, Steve, and Tracy. So basically, just introducing Libby and Bernard, and also a lot of the supporting characters from Season 1 had died. We added Libby and Bernard. So these are the guys who just stand in the background, pop up from time to time, maybe have a line of dialogue, but don't really have any character arcs or character stories. Certainly no flashback episodes. And then you also have, so those are the camp survivors. So those are the people at the main camp, the 815 camp, if you want to call it. But we also have a few other supporting characters who pop up elsewhere, like Desmond. Of course, pretty much exactly the same as it was in season 2, where he's in the hatch and he pops up at the end of season 2. And Rousseau, again, she just pops in from time to time. And then you got Cindy, who's in the tail section, but she never makes it back to the main camp. And then you got, of course, Henry Gale, who's with the others, and then he gets captured, and a.k.a. Ben, but for the purposes of that, I'll call him Henry Gale because his name wasn't revealed as Ben until season 3, so we're still in season 2. And there's Mr. Friendly, of course, again, Tom, but he wasn't called Tom until season 3, due with the beard, and you got Alex. So there, Rousseau's daughter pops up from time to time. And then of course I still have 7 extras, or not 7, sorry, 13 extras who have no lines of dialogue. They're just background pictures, but we have the same, as I said, we have the same actors playing them, so the exact same people in the background, so you can pick them out, so there's a sense of consistency. But they have no dialogue, they're just there as socks or whatever. Anyway, let me get into, now I'm going to describe each of the 13 episodes of my version of Season 2 of Lost. So let's start with Episode 1 of Season 2, Man of Science, Man of Faith. This is a Jack-centric episode. So this episode's pretty much what it was in the actual show, except we get the full story of Jack and Locke going to the hatch. So in the actual season, they save some of these, like Locke and Kate going down and meeting Desmond. They push that back to episode 2. I'm not doing that here. We're not playing with time here. No, we're just gonna cut some of the scenes where they're fighting a bit to save time. But basically, it would be Locke and Kate go down the hatch, they meet Desmond, and then Jack goes and follows them. There's a standoff where he says, "Oh, I'm going to shoot you," and the episode ends there. So pretty much the same. Also, we're going to see Michael and Sawyer and the raft. We're not pushing that back for another episode, and we're seriously condensing it. We're not having anything with the shark or anything. We just get touch base with them very briefly to see that they're still alive. We're not going to get them bitching at each other as much, but of course Michael will still be very upset, and the episode will end with Michael and Sawyer washing up on shore and seeing Jen running, saying others. So basically the ending of, I think that was the ending of episode, it was the ending of episode 2. That would be the ending of this episode. Although, so we'll probably do that and then go to the thing with Jack showdown with Desmond. That will be the end of the episode. Now, the flashbacks with Jack are pretty much exactly the same. Now, keep in mind, in my version, we haven't met Sarah yet. Because in season 1, the flashbacks with Jack only dealt with his father. So we're meeting Sarah for the first time, which gives different connotations because we're not already aware that this is Jack's future wife. We just see the story of her in a car crash and him saving her. So all that stays the same, except I'm going to add a bit of an extra scene at the end that actually do show them getting married. Or just a scene from the wedding. So that's how the flashback story went. It will show Jack and Sarah getting married. So after the incident with the hospital, we'll sort of flash forward a bit to the future where they're getting married. We're not going to have an entire episode of them getting married like the actual show did, because it's a bit of a waste of time. We'll just have one scene at the end of this episode that shows that after he saved her life and got her to walk again, that eventually they become married. Okay, so then we move over to episode 2 of season 2, which is Orientation. This is a Locke centric episode. So the island storyline is pretty much the same with, the confrontation with the hatch when Desmond runs away and Locke wants to fix it, but Jack is being a dick about it, and they eventually fix the computer and start pushing the button. The Michael and Sawyer and Jen stuff, I'm going to condense several episodes storylines into this, where they meet Aunt Lucia and Mr. Echo. And at first they're pretending, and like Ana Lucia pretends to be held captive by the others, but then when they find out they're on the plane, they reveal they're on the plane, so they all make friends, and they go back to the Tailies, or the Tail Section Survivors hatch, and they talk, and they say, and they meet Bernard, and it's like, oh, my wife is Rose, blah blah blah, and so that's all that will be done in this episode. So the flashbacks with Locke will be the same flashbacks we had in Deus Ex Machina in the show, which is the version with his father, because in my version we haven't met Locke's father yet. So we meet Locke's father in this episode, where I don't know if I'm going to have the thing about his mother showing up at the toy store. I'm going to truncate it a bit where it goes straight to like some other way that he just finds out about his father, and he just starts hanging out and meeting him, and then finds out the whole thing was a scam so he can steal his kidney. And then I'm actually going to end the episode with him hooking up with Helen, so I'm condensing some of the stuff that was in the actual orientation, but I'm really condensing it into like one scene, or one or two scenes basically, because so we get the story with Locke being shut out and screaming, oh, you can't do this to me, losing his kidney, and then we'll flash forward a couple years to see him in the support group and how this has affected his life. And then Helen, she's kind of broken, and they meet up through that, and so the episode kind of end with them sort of hooking up and getting together. Cool. So then we'll get into my episode 3, which is And Found, a Jen episode. So in this episode, this is going to be very different than the And Found from the actual show, because anyone knows me knows I don't like that episode. So they might be surprised, but I'm just using the title because my version is totally different. So, well, not totally different, kind of different, because it's similar, and Ana Lucia is making plans to go back to the main camp, to Michael's camp, and so they could get food and get ready to go. But as they're going back, Jen and Michael get separated from the main group. Instead of the whole thing of Michael running off, not doing that, it's just Jen and Michael, like, they're boar attacks or something, and they have to run off, and they get separated, and they can't find the main group. So Michael starts to, like, you get some character building scenes between Michael and Jen, even though I know Jen doesn't speak full English, but they still are able to communicate enough. And Michael gives up, and he doesn't want to be found, and he which gets the title of the episode. He doesn't want to even find Ana Lucia and everything. He just wants to give up and die. But Jen manages to raise his spirits and really communicate to him that he really cares about him, and that he's going to help him find Walt. And then eventually Mr. Echo finds them because he's a tracker, and then he takes them back to the main group with Ana Lucia, and then they start traveling towards the main camp, and that's when Sawyer succumbs to his injuries, and can't walk anymore, and that's where we're in the episode. So it's sort of combining a couple of beats with that storyline. Back at the main beach camp, we have Shannon finds the message in the bottle, and she tells Sun, who's very upset about it, but that's as far as I'll go with that storyline. I'm not doing the whole, I lost my wedding ring, that's a waste of time. And then Tracy and Hurley are sorting out the food in the hatch, kind of like what they did with Hurley and Rose, but again, I'm not spending an entire episode, it's just a tiny subplot. They're not going to have a big party and eat all the food in one night. That's stupid. They're actually going to be smart and rationing it out. So that's just going to be a very brief storyline. And then Locke will also discover that Charlie has the heroin, which is the cliffhanger from season 1. So Locke takes the heroin away from Charlie, chucks it out, throws it away, and then Claire kicks Charlie out of her tent and doesn't want to be around him anymore because realized that he's still taking heroin. So I'm sort of really truncating that storyline as well. It's getting that over with because that was a bit of a disaster. But we just go through it real quick, and I think it would work fine. Now, as for the flashbacks in this episode, these are actually the same Jen flashbacks that we saw in the season 1 episode in translation. That because we never got those in my version of season 1, because in season 1, my version, we just saw Sun's version of events of how Jin was starting to turn into the asshole, but here we get his version where it's Sun's father is making him do things, making him like beat up the guy, and how he's upset and he goes to his father and is like, oh, I just want to marry Sun. I think that will go a lot better with, because oh god, I hated the Sun and Jin flashbacks in the actual Aeon Found, so definitely getting rid of that. But so here we see the same flashbacks we've gotten in translation, which I thought were brilliant because it shows the flip side of the coin, flips everything on its head. We're just saving that for season 2. So yeah, that's how that will go. So then we get into my episode 4 of season 2, which is The Other 48 Days. I am not changing a thing about this episode. I think this episode's perfect. It fits actually into the story I want to tell. We see the backstory of Ana Lucia and Mr. Echo. We meet Nathan. We meet Goodwin, and we see Ana Lucia figure out that Goodwin. I think the only difference that I would make, and this is actually going back to episode 3 as well, is that Ana Lucia is not going to be as antagonistic in my version as she was in the show. This is something I'm really nicking in the bud, because I know a lot of people didn't like Ana Lucia, and that's because they made her too antagonistic. So Ana Lucia, she is going to be very sort of rough and stern, but she's not going to be totally beating up Sawyer and calling him names and hitting him with rocks or whatever like she did in the actual show. And also in The Other 48 Days, she's going to be stern, but she's not going to be like quite as bad as she was in the show. So that's pretty much the only change I'm going to make to this episode. Everything else is pretty much going to work out the same, except of course the ending, because I'm not doing the whole Saeed thing, which we'll get into shortly. So The Other 48 Days, my version goes up to the end of my version of Aeon Found, where they're just traveling towards the camp. I haven't gotten to the part with the others attacking yet. But let's get to that. So let's get to my episode 5, which is Collision, Ana Lucia episode, in a totally different version. I'm totally changing this episode up, because I'm not doing... Here's the thing, Shannon lives in my version, because you might be like, oh my god, you're letting Shannon live, she sucks. But here's the thing, as I said, in my version, she's just a supporting character. Now, I did kill Boone in my version, but that's because it kind of helped the storyline, but he was still not that important of a character. And this version, I'm actually going to keep Shannon alive. Because she hardly ever appears. She's just in the background every once in a while, and she never got in a relationship with Saeed. That's ridiculous. So, and it also goes into, again, they made Ana Lucia too antagonistic. They made people hate her, and the thing is that they thought, oh, we wanted to make it interesting. We wanted to add tension to Ana Lucia's group coming with the main group, or by doing that, they actually made the audience not like Ana Lucia, or not like the tail section survivors. So again, I'm making the audience like her a bit more. I'm making her more of a likable, relatable character. So I'm not having that whole storyline where she kills Shannon by accident, confronts Saeed. I'm not even doing a version of that. That's just gone. So what am I doing? Okay, so on their way back to the camp, the tail section survivors are attacked by the others. Cindy is taken. That's pretty much what they did. But then Michael is taken. But instead of when Cindy disappears, it's like in the show where they just turn around and she's not there. Where the hell is she? But when Michael's taken, they actually see people coming and grabbing him and trying to take him. So Ana Lucia attacks Michael's captors, and she kills one of them and manages to injure the other, but the other the one she injured still beats her up and gets away with Michael. So she's like wants to go after Michael, but Mr. Echo wants to save Sawyer, who's dying. So the group of tailies are kind of split on what to do. See, it's not this thing where Ana Lucia is like, oh, you have to stay here because I'm being mean or whatever. Not doing that. Instead, it's more of a quandary where who do we save? Do we save Michael or do we save Sawyer? It's kind of a split thing. So the obvious thing happens, the group splits. So Jen wants to go with Ana Lucia to save Michael because, again, as we established, Michael's his friend. Or Libby, Bernard, want to go back with Mr. Echo to save Sawyer. So they go back with Mr. Echo, and Mr. Echo takes Sawyer back to camp. And so we get a few scenes with Ana Lucia and Jen trying to track down this other. They're doing a somewhat good job, but again, Ana Lucia is not a tracker. She doesn't have Mr. Echo, and again, there's an argument where she wants Mr. Echo to stay because she needs a tracker, but he refuses because no one else there is strong enough to carry Sawyer back to camp. So he's like, I'm not going to let him die. So he carries Sawyer back to camp. So eventually, when Jen and Ana Lucia aren't having any luck, so she tells Jen to go back to camp because he wants to be with his wife, and saying, go be with your wife because we're probably never going to do it. So Jen eventually gives up and he goes back to be with Sun. But when Mr. Echo arrives with Sawyer, Jack treats him very quickly like he did in the show. But again, instead of there being a conflict, and Jack's Mr. Echo says that that Michael's been taking Ana Lucia's out chasing him. So Jack and Locke decide to go with Mr. Echo to try to save Michael. So then back in camp, we get the reunion where Jen and Sun meet up, and we see them. And then Rose and Bernard have their long-awaited reunion as well. Jack and Locke meet up. They find him in Mr. Echo. They manage to find Ana Lucia. And while Ana Lucia gets attacked by the others, she's almost killed, but then Jack and Locke show up at the right time, and they save her and they kill the other. But we find that it was the distraction, basically, so that the others could get away, and they end up getting away with Michael, and they never find them. So Jack, Locke, and they manage to save Ana Lucia's life, but they lose Michael, so they just have to give up and go back to camp because the others just managed to distract them. Now, as for the flashbacks, the Ana Lucia flashbacks will be a truncated version of both her flashbacks, but I'm skipping the Christian Shepherd storyline. So basically, it's focusing on her flashbacks on Collision, where it's about her being a cop and being attacked by that guy and killing him, whatever, and then it ends with her running away to Australia, and then she goes at the airport in Australia. She meets Jack. We show, because I never did the Exodus flashbacks, if you remember, in my version, so we never saw Jack and Ana Lucia meet, so we see them meet in the flashbacks here at the end, and this sort of is intercut with Jack meeting Ana Lucia on the island. So when Mr. Echo goes to Jack and says Ana Lucia, he's like, wait, I know who that is, but the audience doesn't know how he knows her. But then at the end of the episode, we see them meet at the airport. And we're like, oh, that's how they know. And then it's intercut with Jack sort of saving Ana Lucia's life and sort of treating her injuries real quick and getting her back to the main camp. Well, she still wants to go after the others, but Locke and Mr. Echo say, look, we lost the trail, there's no way to get them, you're going to die if you keep going after them. And Jack sort of relates with theirs, like, please let me save you, and that sort of relates to the flashbacks and how she doesn't think she's worth being saved, and eventually she does. So that's how that episode works. Anyway, we'll get into my episode 6, which is the Long Con, a Sawyer episode. So there's a time jump in this episode. It takes place several weeks after the previous episode, after the tail section survivors have integrated into the main group. And so we jump to the point where Sawyer has recovered from his injury, so we skip the whole thing with Kate healing him and all that. Maybe that's implied in a brief scene in the previous episode, but we jump straight to the point where Sawyer is finally recovered. He's able to go back, and he finds that all of his stuff has been stolen. And it didn't make sense to me in the actual season why it took so long to Sawyer complain about the fact his stash has been stolen, but here we do it right away. As soon as he wakes up, he goes to his tent, all of his stuff is gone, so he confronts Jack. He's like, what the hell? And Jack, of course, is like, this isn't your stuff, it belongs to the group, and then this pisses Sawyer off. And then you have a storyline with Ana Lucia pressuring Jack to go after the others, kind kind of similar. It's a bit similar, but different because she had just gotten back from being attacked from them, and she's like, and they had taken Michael. And of course, this is also my way of truncating the Michael storyline, so we don't have to do the whole thing where he's talking to Walt on the computer and they trick him or whatever. We just truncate that and get this right out of the way. And the whole thing with them, chasing after Michael again, that was just a repeat of what they did in season 1. So skipping over that, truncating that, and into this, and then so. But this episode is pretty much the same as it was, where Sawyer sees that there's a conflict because Ana Lucia and Jack want to go with the others, but Locke doesn't, so Sawyer uses this as a con to steal the guns away from Jack and Locke, just like they did in the episode. And Charlie helps him, just like he did in the episode, because Locke, broke him and Claire up. We don't have to do that whole stupid fire and water storyline, which sucks, but it's still, in my version, Locke, stole Charlie's heroin and told Claire about it, and Charlie is like really depressed because he's away from Claire, so he wants to get back at Locke, so he helps Sawyer run the scam, and Sawyer steals the gun. Now, so the flashbacks are pretty much the same as they were in the episodes, because the flashbacks really work, so I'm keeping these the same, with Sawyer meeting Cassidy and Sawyer running this, teaching her how to con. And again, you get the same sort of dynamic in the episode where Sawyer's like with Kate and saying, "Oh, Ana Lucia," and then you find out the thing is all just Sawyer's con. At the same time, you find out in flashback that it's all Sawyer's con to get at Cassidy, and he betrays her. All that works, so all that's staying the same. So next episode we get is One of Them, which is a Sayid flashback episode. So this episode's pretty similar, pretty much the same as what they did in the show, where Sayid Rousseau takes Sayid to Henry Gale and he interrogates Henry Gale. But the difference in my version is that there was no thing with Shannon being killed or whatever, so Sayid isn't personally motivated to like, oh, you hurt me, you killed my girlfriend, whatever. None of that personal. It's more of a sort of professional. He's one of them. He's one of the enemies, so let me interrogate him. In fact, this is kind of taking the place of the episode Confidence Man in season 1, because in my version I didn't do the whole thing where he tortured Sawyer or whatever, so we never got to see Sayid as a torturer, so we do get to see that in this episode. So so we see him torturing. It's more of a matter of fact that he doesn't make it personal, but it's still the same sort of thing where Jack doesn't want him to torture him and locks him out, but Jack finally gets Locke to open the door by saying he's not going to push the button, so he rushes in and stops Sayid from torturing. Except again, Said's not like punching him because, oh, you killed her or whatever. He's just methodically torturing her because he's just he knows that he can tell that Henry Gale's lying. And so the Sayid flashbacks work are exactly the same, keeping those the same. That show him in the Gulf War, being taught by the CIA guy how to torture, and he so it goes well, it juxtaposed well with seeing him torture. We see how he became a torturer in the first place, so that all works. So then we get into my next episode, which is What Kate Did. Kate-centric episode, of course. So, Kate starts to tell Jack, she's able to tell that Jack is hiding something from her, which is, of course, that they have Henry Gale because he keeps trying to keep her away from the hatch. Where meanwhile, Locke asks Ana Lucia for help with Henry Gale, and the same sort of thing where he draws a map. So she goes to Sayid, and just Sayid, and they go off on a mission to, find the balloon. But here's the main thing I'm changing. Ana Lucia and Sayid end up hooking up on this journey. So they pretty much end up like falling in love and I actually got this kind of vibe. I got a strong Ana Lucia Sayid thing going in the actual episode, but in the actual episode didn't make sense because Ana Lucia had like killed his lover, and they had they tried to kill each other before, so they had this natural like enemies. But in my version, that's not the case. None of that ever happened. And I think Ana Lucia is, I think, a much better match for Sayid than Shannon ever was. So instead of doing Shannon, I'm actually having Sayid and Ana Lucia be a thing, which I think makes a lot more sense. So in my version, Charlie doesn't go off with them. It's just Ana Lucia and Sayid alone, which allows for them to, hook up on the way. But meanwhile, Charlie and Mr. Echo start to hit it off, and Charlie helps him build the church, because I'm kind of skipping over the whole 23rd Psalm storyline, but Charlie sort of relates to Mr. Echo more because he's a priest, and Charlie's like really depressed in the dumps because nobody likes him at the moment because they found out he was doing heroin again. So Mr. Echo sort of helps him, gives him purpose, and the purpose is to help him build this church. But getting back to Kate, she confronts Jack about what he's keeping secret, and eventually he reluctantly reveals Henry Gale. And Henry Gale meets with Kate and starts taunting him, saying that he led Ana Lucia into a trap, and that freaks them all out. And meanwhile, Hurley and Libby start to hook up as well. We get the whole thing with Hurley crushing on Libby as well. So it's mainly, I'm using this episode mainly as a character building episode for all the characters going on. I mean, it's a Kate-centric, but we actually don't... There are episodes in the show itself where we don't see the main character that much. We just see her every once in a while enough to give flashback to her flashbacks. And the flashbacks are exactly the same as what Kate did. They reveal what she did, how she killed her stepfather, who's actually her real father. So all that stays the same. We're just getting rid of the whole storyline with her seeing a horse. We don't really need that, and her going crazy, oh, there's a horse, or whatever. And you just don't need that. But otherwise, their flashbacks will be pretty much the same. So anyway, we get into the next episode, which is maternity leave. So the Claire storyline, this is a Claire-centric episode. So the Claire storyline goes the same, with her and Kate and Russo going to the Hatch for vaccine. So that all plays out just as it did in the show. But otherwise, the storylines are different, where Locke and Henry Gale get stuck in a lockdown while Jack plays poker with Sawyer, Hurley, and Tracy. So this is basically combining the events of lockdown, but I'm sort of really truncating it. I'm not like, it's not going to be a huge thing where Locke and Henry are like start to freak out. We don't see no invisible map or anything like that. We just really truncate it where Locke gets Locke out of the room and only Henry can help him, and Locke gets sort of stuck under the thing where his leg gets injured. And so this allows Locke and Henry to sort of bond. So Kate and Claire, on their way back from the Hatch after Russo leaves them, they discover Michael in the jungle. So again, truncating this storyline. So they bring Michael back, and at the same time, Sayid and Ana Lucia get back from their journey where they found out that Henry Gale was lying. So they all go to the Hatch. Well, Claire goes back to her son, but the rest, Kate takes Michael and Jack and Sayid and Ana Lucia. They all go to the Hatch where Locke is all friends with Henry Gale, but then Sayid reveals that he's a liar, that he's one of them. Now, flashbacks of this episode are exactly the same, where we see Claire with their time with Ethan and the others for season 1. These were perfect, these were great, and it will go together well with the Claire storyline of her and Russo finding out what happened. So all of that is staying the same. Cool, so then we'll get into the next episode, episode 10, which is Dave, a Hurley episode. The Hurley storyline with seeing Dave and Libby helping him out and him wanting to jump off the cliff because he thinks it's all in his head, and Libby says, no, we're not, and she kisses him, and they start to hook up. That's all the same. We're keeping that exactly the same. But again, other than that, we're changing things up, and we're having Ana Lucia. This is kind of the same in the episode where Ana Lucia stops Sayid from killing Henry, but then later Henry repays her by trying to kill her because, again, Henry's upset that she killed Goodwin or whatever. And so Ana Lucia, and instead of like going to sleep with Sawyer or anything like that, she enlists the help of her now like boyfriend Sayid and says, help me get the gun from Sawyer. So Sayid distracts Sawyer while Ana Lucia steals a gun from him and goes to kill Henry. But she finds that she can't do it, so instead she gives the gun to Michael, and Michael, of course, kills her and lets Henry go and then shoots himself. So I'm having sort of combining this episode with Two for the Road a bit, but sort of truncating it. And well, still the main focus will be the Dave stuff, but we'll have this stuff going at the same time, where it ends with this very shocking moment where Michael kills Ana Lucia, but not Libby. Again, Libby is surviving in my version, keeping her alive. A lot of people were saying, oh, it's kind of a shame they killed Libby off. We're not killing Libby off in my version. We're just killing off Ana Lucia, which I think is shocking enough. And again, in my version, she's a more likable character, so people will be more affected by her death. Now, the flashbacks in this episode are exactly the same, with Hurley showing his time in the mental institution, and that Dave is just in his head, which goes along well with his island story. So then we'll get into my episode 11, which is Question Mark, Mr. Eko episode. So they return to find Ana Lucia dying, but this time it's Sayid who pines over her dying body as Jack unsuccessfully tries to save her, and she dies before she can reveal Michael had betrayed them. So in the actual show is Libby doing this, but since I'm not having Libby get shot as Ana Lucia doesn't die immediately, she's the one who's sort of dying, and Sayid's the one who's pining after her. Meanwhile, Mr. Eko and Locke go to find the question mark. It will be the same thing where Mr. Eko gets a vision from, his brother saying, "Oh, go help John find the question mark." And so they here, because I never did the 23rd Psalm, so in my version, this is where Mr. Eko finds out that his brother's plan is on the island. He finds it by the question mark, so he sees this as a sign that the island is like special and leading them to greater things. So they go into the Pearl and they watch the video, and Mr. Eko is more convinced than ever that this is all his work and they need to push the button, and that's what he's supposed to do, while at the same time Locke thinks it's all a joke and that it's all useless, and he's very disheartened by it. So Mr. Eko's flashbacks in this episode are the same as they were in the 23rd Psalm, revealing Yimmy's backstory. So not really doing the flashbacks that were in the question mark thing where he goes to Australia and sees Claire's psychic, and kind of just skipping all that. So we're still leaving Claire's psychic up in the open in my version. And in my version, we're just focusing on his time in Africa, where he's brought up as a warlord and goes to Yimmy. And so that way, because with this episode starts, you get the vision of Yimmy. You don't know who he is, but as the episode unfolds with the flashbacks, you start to learn who Yimmy is. And so it's combined with Yimmy saying, "Oh, this is what you need to do, Mr. Eko." And by the end of the episode, you get why Mr. Eko is so willing to listen to Yimmy, because you get the backstory and how Yimmy died because of what Mr. Eko did. So it's a very touching episode. Anyway, we'll get into my next episode, number 12, which is 3 minutes, a Michael centric episode, where we see Michael's flashbacks from the island. So this is pretty much the same as the actual episode, except Sayid is more upset over Ana Lucia's death. Since Libby didn't die, Hurley's not upset. Hurley just wants to go with Michael. Michael still has the list of 4 names that he's supposed to bring, and so he's trying to get Hurley to go. And Hurley wants to go just because he wants to help Michael, and he wants to find Walt. And Libby is sort of advising him not to go because he's not the best adventurer. But Hurley's like, "No, I gotta help Michael." But meanwhile, and Michael's trying to not get Sayid to go. He has a better excuse, because he says that Saeed's too upset because of Ana Lucia's death. He's taking it too personally, and he doesn't want Sayid there. But just like in the actual episode, Sayid figures out that Michael's lying, because he knows when someone's lying. And it goes to Jack, and they come up with the exact same plan that they did to use Desmond's boat. So Michael's flashbacks are exactly the same, where we see his time, although because we don't have the thing with him talking on the computer, so it's not exactly the same, but it shows the time for when Michael was taken by the others and him being brought. So we never got that scene with Mr. Friendly in the campfire, but we see Mr. Friendly in this episode, where he's sort of taunting Michael, and we see him brought to the thing where Beatrice is asking him all these questions about him, and he's like, "Well, what are you talking about?" And eventually they give him 3 minutes with Walt, and he makes a deal for the boat and for Walt if he helps do it. So it explains why he killed Ana Lucia and let Henry go. So we're getting to my season finale of season 2, episode 13, Live Together, Die Alone. This is a Desmond episode. The episode is pretty much exactly, because it's one of my favorite episodes of the show, so I'm pretty much keeping it pretty much exactly the same, with Charlie and Mr. Echo trying to stop Locke and Desmond from not pushing the button, while Jack, Kate, Sawyer, and Hurley are led into a trap by Michael and then eventually captured by the others, and they let Hurley go back to camp while taking Jack, Kate, and Sawyer back with them, and letting Michael and Walt leave the island. And Saeed and Son are on the ship, on the boat, and they sail around the island. They see the four-toed statue, and they see that they've been led to a trap, and the others aren't really there. Back in the main camp, we get Bernard, Rose, Libby, Shannon, Steve, Tracy, and Claire. Maybe a few interactions with them, and we see them, all of them, when the weirdness breaks out with the purple sky after Desmond turns the failsafe key and everything goes all weird, and they're like, what the hell's going on? Also, like in the show itself, Charlie slowly starts to win over Claire in the previous episode by being helpful to the baby, not being creepy. And in this episode, when he returns from the hatch, she asks him what's going on, and he is very nice to her, so they kiss, so they are back in their good graces, keeping that the same as well. So pretty much the same. So Desmond flashbacks are pretty much exactly the same. Yeah, so pretty much the same. We actually see Libby give Desmond the boat, which is going to have different connotations because Desmond will actually see Libby in the camp this time. But he doesn't. When he sees her, he's like, "Do I know you?" And Libby's like, "No." So she completely denies it and saying that I don't know you. And Desmond is like trying to place her because she looked a bit different. It's like, "Aren't you the one that gave me the vote?" And she's like, "Aren't you Elizabeth?" And she's like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. That wasn't me." So it's kind of a weird thing, kind of similar to the thing that where Hurley's like, "Didn't I know you?" And by the way, Libby did pop up in the mental institution at the end of Dave, just as she did in the episode. So I'm keeping that. I got plans for Libby. You'll have to stay tuned for my other videos, but yeah, I have something very specific planned. But in this case, it's a bit more. I mean, it's 3 years ago, so Desmond's memory is not clear, but he's like, "I'm pretty sure you were that one that gave me the boat." And she's like, "No, that wasn't me. What the hell are you talking about? I'm pleased to meet you, but I've never seen you before." And so keep on to this. I am going to pay this off in later seasons. Anyway, so the Desmond flashbacks are with Penny and him going to the island, meeting the other guy in the hatch. However, I'm not going to have this other guy in the hatch that Desmond meets be the same CIA guy that Saeed saw in his flashbacks, because as I talked about in my actual review, this creates a paradox. This creates a continuity error because it means that the Dharma Initiative was still around in the early 90s, which they couldn't have been because Rousseau came to Island in 87 and the Dharma Initiative were gone by then. So this is just some random guy. It's not the same CIA agent that that Saeed saw. Well, I'll still call him Kelvin though, and the storyline with him plays out the same, where Kelvin fixes up the Desmond's boat in secret, and Desmond kills him by accident. Now pushes the button. We find out that he's the one that crashed the plane. All that is staying the same, and then Desmond has to turn the failsafe key. And we also still get the ending with Penny and those two Brazilian guys in the Arctic, and they said, "Oh, we found it. What is this? What's going on?" Difference is, I'm actually going to pay this off in later seasons, unlike the show did. But this is an amazing scene that I loved, so I'm keeping it, and I'm going to get back to this later. I have to watch my later videos. I will pay this off, unlike the show did. But that's how we're going to end this season. So that is it. That is my version of Season 2 of Lost, how I would write it if I was taking a reboot. I'll be back in about 6 weeks where I'll cover part 3 of how I would write Season 3 of Lost. But in 2 weeks, I will return with my review of the first 8 episodes of season 3, going up to episode 8, Flashes Before Your Eyes. So that will come out in 2 weeks if you want to check that out. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out my channel as I do many more videos on other shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.